Welcome to the Cumbria Chamber of Commerce podcast, your weekly update of business news and issues from around Cumbria. Find out how we support new business and help existing businesses to grow and flourish at cumbriachamber.co.uk. Now here's the Chamber's Business Engagement Manager, Julian Whittle, with this week's episode.
Hello, I'm here to talk about cybercrime and online fraud with Cumbria's Police and Crime Commissioner Peter McCall and Jon Hill, a detective with Cumbria Constabulary's new Cyber and Digital Crime Unit. Peter, tell me about this new Cyber and Digital Crime Unit. Why have you set it up? What is its remit? Is it there primarily to investigate offences, or is preventing cybercrime the priority?
Well, the answer to that is both. Clearly, if we can prevent crime in the first place, whether it be cybercrime or indeed any other, we stop people becoming victims of crime. We save the cost of pursuing criminals, investigating, and also the whole criminal justice process of taking people through the courts and possibly even locking them up. So if you can stop that happening at all, then clearly that's the best answer. But the reality is that there are criminals out there who do commit this and other types of crime, and there's no question about it. Cybercrime has been increasing exponentially in recent years, to the point that actually the constabulary, along with policing across the country, have actually been fighting a bit of a losing battle and slipping behind the curve. And that's why here in Cumbria, with the council tax money that we imposed this year, we're putting that allows us to put extra resource into this to both deal with business crime, but also preventing vulnerable people, and in particular children and vulnerable adults from becoming susceptible to be victim of this kind of crime.
And how big an issue is it? I mean, thinking particularly here for businesses, because I've seen figures from the British Chambers of Commerce that suggest 1 in 5 businesses has been affected by cybercrime just in the last 12 months. Yeah,
1 in 5 businesses, and about 23% of reports of cybercrime come from businesses. But I suspect, I can't prove this, but I suspect that this is probably just the tip of the iceberg. We know that a lot of cybercrime goes unreported for various reasons. Sometimes it's about sensitive stuff when people as individuals are affected, and businesses often don't want to advertise the fact that they've been susceptible to an online fraud. Yeah. And so it's almost certainly true that not all of this is reported. And so, but I think what we can be clear on is that it is enormous. The scale is increasing year on year. And that's why we absolutely have to do something about it.
Jon, can you talk us through the different types of cybercrime that businesses might encounter and how they can guard against them? We'll start with hacking, where the criminal gains access to your systems.
Well, hacking, as we know in its simplest terms, is a cyber criminal who gets unauthorized access to our computers or our networks and then installs malware, malicious software, that's purely designed to disrupt or damage or gain unauthorized access to the data that our computers hold. One type of malware, spyware, which we're aware of, is malicious software on our computers that captures your web browsing habits, your email messages, your passwords or your usernames, and then transmits that data back to the cyber criminal's computer. It's as damaging as if you would be conducting your business and someone was looking over your shoulder all day. It can have a devastating effect on individuals and businesses, and it's one of the many forms of malware that we need to be aware of and protect ourselves against, because we know if you're a small or medium-sized enterprise, then there is a 1 in 2 chance that you will experience at some point a cybersecurity breach. So it's very important we protect ourselves against these attacks.
We heard a lot about ransomware. The NHS and some large businesses were affected by the WannaCry attack in 2017. Explain what ransomware is and how businesses can combat it?
Yeah, ransomware, again, it's another type of malicious software that once a hacker has got that ransomware onto your company's computer, it has access to all the data that you hold, and it can either threaten to publish all of the data on your company's systems or block your access to it until a ransom is paid, which we've seen recently. The hackers will encrypt all of your files, all of your company's files, making them completely inaccessible, and then demand a payment, usually in cryptocurrency. We've heard of Bitcoin, which is one. There are several others. And unless you pay that ransom, they will not decrypt your files. And that can have a big impact. It does happen. We have seen it happen here in Cumbria, where a company was reduced to conducting its business over a couple of days on pencil and paper because they couldn't access any of their files at all.
What's your advice to a business that finds themselves the subject of an attack? I mean, is it ever the sensible thing to do to pay the ransom?
We would not advise whether a company or an individual pay that ransom or not. It's entirely up to them. But they should consider, even if they did pay the ransom, there is no guarantee that the person making that ransom would actually give them the key to decrypt their data anyway. And they would also consider that if they did pay the ransom, what would be the incentive for the hacker to give them their key, because you could then make that publicly accessible. And so the hacker wouldn't maybe be able to conduct that offences with that particular type of ransomware, because people would have the key to decrypt it. What we would advise to companies in respect of ransomware attacks is to always make sure they've backed up their company files on a regular basis, weekly, if not every other day. And their backups are always stored off the network on a separate server, so that if anybody was to fall victim to a ransomware attack, they can go to their backup drive, so they've not lost all of that business data, because it can have a massive effect on them.
And similar to ransomware, a distributed denial of service or DDoS attacks, what's involved there?
DDoS, distributed denial of service, it's when so much data is sent to a website that it crashes and it becomes inaccessible. It just can't deal with the amount of traffic, be that messages or requests to connect to it. Again, it's linked to, similar to ransomware, to extortion. Normally a payment requirement is made by the suspect. You will not be able to get your website up and running again until you pay us a certain amount. It can have a huge impact on certainly smaller businesses solely relying on online trading, individuals, and that can also have the knock-on effect. It's not just that initial loss of business, but the physical, even the psychological, the mental health, the stress and the worry that can cause people.
Okay. I mean, all the threats that we've been discussing up till now are also what you call external threats from criminals. But of course, cybercrime can be perpetrated by your employees, the business's own employees. Is it more difficult to prevent fraud by a member of staff? And what should businesses be doing there?
Well, it's one of the dangers businesses may face will come from within their own organisation, from their own users that could be malicious. It may be unintentional, but we'll come on to that later. But from the malicious side, it could happen because users are already past different layers of security. They're already in the building. They're already logged on to the network. They're already in the systems. So businesses need to consider how cybercrime could be committed within their own environment. Certain things, certainly if companies have their own IT infrastructure, they may have some of this in place. But certainly for smaller businesses, things to consider, you could have access permissions. That's giving staff access to systems that's only required to conduct their job. For example, you wouldn't have someone in marketing needing to access the whole network. They wouldn't need to get into the accounts area of the network. That is one. Keeping passwords secure. If you were to allow someone to log on to your computer under your password, well, that makes passwords irrelevant. It's always just making sure not letting anybody else log on to your system, and using auditing facilities to log access. If staff know that their activity is being audited and they could be easily caught, they're much less likely to do anything wrong.
Okay. Now let's move on to, I suppose you call them cyber-enabled crimes, which I suppose are conventional frauds, but with a digital twist. I mean, the obvious one to cite is phishing attacks. That's phishing spelt with a PH, which are designed to get access to banking details. How do we guard against these?
These emails, which what phishing attacks are, emails that are appearing legitimate, and they're trying to get you to either enter personal details, usernames, passwords, or trying to get you to download a file. There was a recent HMRC phishing scam that we saw. They were trying to encourage you.
Saying you got a tax refund due.
Exactly. And that was rather large. That was nationally recently. And we know that 80% of cyber attacks are successful due to human error or lack of awareness in cybersecurity. And companies recently, they've spent a lot of time securing and improving their IT systems in an effort to protect their business and their clients. And it's for this reason, hackers have changed their approach. They're honing their techniques, increasingly targeting staff and exploiting this human error, which is why phishing emails and phishing attacks have become a lot more prevalent recently. They're relying on people, they're relying on staff and individuals making mistakes. One of the biggest bits of advice was to take 5 minutes. There was a campaign, take 5. If you get an email, why have you got it? Why has somebody sent you this email? Why does somebody want me to put my username, to put my password in there? Why does someone want me to open this link? To take 5 minutes, have a cup of tea and just think, where is that from and why have they sent it?
Yeah. I mean, a variation of phishing is an impersonation fraud, which is where the fraudster pretends to be maybe a senior manager within your business or maybe a supplier of your business and instructs you to change payment details. Have you come across much of that?
We have. It's like a business email compromise. It's a form of phishing attack. A cyber criminal impersonates a senior executive, a CEO, maybe a partner or a director of a firm, and attempts to coerce an employee or a customer to transfer funds, to change account numbers. It does happen. It's a serious threat. We have seen it. It's one of the fastest growing, low cost, highest return types of cybercrime. It's very easy for cyber criminals to commit. Emails can look genuine. It's easy for cyber criminals to spoof email headers so it appears it's from that legitimate person. Hackers, if they've already accessed your network, they can see previous emails that you've sent, so they can engineer the language that they use to make it appear much more legitimate. With these kind of offences, always verify requests for amended payments, or if a partner's asked to change an invoice, send money, transfer accounts, is always verify it. Not via email, obviously not by replying to it, but by an established contact, telephone, phone them, a 10-second phone call just to verify these emails could save a company thousands, if not tens of thousands of pounds.
Now, business people, along with everybody, I suppose, uses public Wi-Fi now and again to keep in touch. Do we need to take any special precautions when using these public Wi-Fi networks?
We really should. We conduct business securely in the workplace, but then we can go out for a business lunch, go to a local coffee shop, log onto their public Wi-Fi, and potentially expose ourselves to all sorts of issues. We know that cyber criminals can set up fake Wi-Fi hotspots. You think you're logging onto the coffee shop's Wi-Fi, but you're actually not, and then they're able to intercept any sensitive data that you transfer online. And that is the key message: not to transfer or be involved in any kind of sensitive information when you're away from the office or via any other public Wi-Fi hotspots. Precautions that you can take: use your own 3G or 4G or 5G networks when you're out. They have built-in security. You can use VPNs. They are virtual private networks, which you can, if you just Google it, there's many out there. Some are free. You can pay for them if you want to. They just involves a technique where it encrypts your data before sending it across the internet and shields your browsing activity. So that's something to consider.
Yeah.
And sorry, if I could just add, mobile phones, everybody talks about antivirus or software on their laptops or desktops. How many people actually have antivirus on their mobile phones? Because people conduct as much business online, banking, social media on their phone as they actually do a computer, which is something for people to consider.
Definitely. What else should businesses be doing as a matter of good practice? I mean, for instance, what should they be doing to train staff around cybersecurity?
We know that 50%, and as we touched on earlier, 50% of the worst security breaches are caused by unintentional human error. Training and awareness in the key areas of cybersecurity is vitally important to protect and secure our business, our staff, your business's data and your customer data that your business may hold. Training doesn't have to be complicated or time consuming. I think I understand and appreciate businesses' concerns that training may cost a lot of money. There may be extractions. If you are a business with 100 members of staff, you want to send them all on an 8-hour training day, 2 days a year. That's 1,600 business hours. Maybe where your staff aren't working, it's going to affect productivity of the company. Maybe they're not billable hours. We understand that difficulty with training. What I would say, and what will be made available on the Cumbria Chamber of Commerce website, is a very good video from the National Cybersecurity Centre. It's a short learning package. It's 15 minutes long. It's something that staff can do at their desk just before a lunch hour, whatever time. It's a very good, very informative introduction to those key elements of cybersecurity. Has a short quiz at the end. I think it's a very, very good start for business to try and encourage all of their staff to do.
And can you give us some examples of simple steps that the businesses can take to improve their cybersecurity?
Absolutely. A couple of the key ones: keeping strong, separate passwords, especially for your email account, but strong, separate passwords for all your accounts. I think we've trained ourselves to use passwords over the years that are harder and harder to remember, but actually easier for computers to guess. You know, an uppercase, a lowercase, a number, a symbol, 8 characters long. We need to use more complex passwords and for different accounts. We can write passwords down. The messages over the years was always, don't write them down. This makes you more susceptible for them to be found. Well, I write my passwords down. I keep them in a locked drawer in a locked office that's in a secure building overnight. That's as safe as those passwords will ever be, rather than just using the same complicated one that I think I can remember for all of them. So to writing them down, providing you keep those safe, are absolutely fine. Always use the latest software updates and application updates. These are designed to fix weaknesses. So when you say something wants to update itself, always do that, because the older versions, they have weaknesses that cyber criminals can target. And so just those two government figures show that just by following those 2 simple steps, 80%, that's the majority of cyber crimes, can be prevented. There is, for business, there's 2-factor authentication, which works well, and some of the details about that will be on the website as well. It can be a bit more difficult in a business environment that maybe want to move to a more streamlined single sign-on model, but it is an option. And I think we understand this. It's a fine balancing act for business, especially between security and convenience. Yeah. Because too much of one will drastically impact the other, depending on the size of the business. But there are many, many options out there, and as we say, the links to the best advice will be on the webpage.
So let's look at the worst case now. So a business falls victim to cybercrime, or maybe spots an attempted scam. What should they do? Where can they report it?
Action Fraud has been the main reporting system for fraud and cybercrime. You can report that online. They also offer a service, 24-hour a day, 7-day-a-week service if you're suffering a live real-time cyber attack. There is the cyber helpline as well, which is simple advice. Again, if you're the victim of an ongoing cyber crime. Us as well, obviously at Cumbria Police, our cyber and digital crime unit, you can report anything to us. We would encourage certainly any advice or if any intelligence that anybody has of any incident or any attack that they've suffered is to pass that on. And obviously with the introduction of GDPR recently, if you have fallen victim to a cyber attack where any customer details have been taken, there is a requirement to report that to the Information Commissioner's office as well.
Yeah, we're actually recording this podcast, I think, the day after the news broke that British Airways was being hit by a £183 million penalty.
Yes.
After for basically being negligent and not preventing a cyber attack, which I think they harvested the details of about 500,000 customers.
500,000 people they did. I wouldn't want that to deter business of reporting it to the Information Commissioner's office. That £183 million is British Airways. It's all taken on a certain scale and a percentage of the business in respect of those fines. But yes, there certainly is a requirement.
But yeah, it's a good warning to businesses. You need to be on top of it, isn't it, really?
Absolutely.
Now, when I was talking to Peter earlier, he mentioned there's under-reporting of cybercrime. I've seen exactly the same thing on the National Crime Agency's website. Why do you think that is the case? Why don't businesses report cybercrime? Even if the attempt fails and they haven't necessarily lost out financially.
Well, this is the biggest thing I want people to take away from this. Is this under-reporting? I think the cyber profile for Cumbria in the last financial year was only 16% of reports of all cybercrime were from business. And if you look again from a recent Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary report, estimates that 50% of all crime across the board is cyber related.
Really?
Which is huge. But we're not seeing that in the reports that are coming forward. And there may be reasons for that Mr. McCall touched on earlier. It may be to a company, its reputational damage they may be concerned of, maybe embarrassment. Somebody clicked on a link, something happened. They don't want to tell people what they've done. They may feel they may suffer a loss in public or customer confidence. And for many medium-sized business that has its own IT infrastructure, they pay companies to manage their software, their networks. They may just say, we have an issue, can you solve it? And that does happen. We have seen that happen once we've spoken to people and yet said, well, why did you not tell the police? We need to know. And I'll tell you why shortly. But I did also hear once, which was, well, what's the point of telling you? It's cybercrime. We understand the nature of cybercrime, that we may not identify the offenders. It crosses borders, international borders. As an example, if you were unfortunate enough to have a bicycle stolen and you lived in Carlisle, there is a very good chance that suspect who stole your bicycle lives in Carlisle. If you are a company and you are the victim of a ransomware attack, there is every opportunity the suspect of that attack lives in Russia or North Korea or any country in the world. So there is a difficulty there and people's belief of, well, what's the point of reporting it? But it's vital that people do and that companies do, because criminals continually hone their techniques to exploit victims. Cybercrimes are constantly evolving. And to effectively combat this, we need to build that intelligence picture for the future. We need to know what's going on. So the more we know, the more intelligence that we get, we can share that with our partners regionally, nationally, even internationally, to identify these trends and patterns that help us direct resources and cyber staffing and enforcement for the future, to prevent it. I think sometimes, again, there's a concern, well, how much time is it going to take if I report it? Well, it really doesn't take that long at all. Of companies that I've spoken to that have fallen victim of cyber crimes, especially those with an IT support, I don't need to trouble the managers. I don't need to trouble the CEOs. I just speak to the IT firm. They are the ones that are going to be able to access the systems and provide us with the data. For instance, from a ransomware attack, it might be IP address, computer addresses that the ransomware has been sent from, executable files that have been left, traces that have been left from these ransomware attacks. They will be able to provide those to us. Email addresses, these cryptocurrency addresses that people have asked ransoms to be paid for. That it does not take long for us to be provided with that data to investigate and then to share with our partners, as I say, to build up that picture to help us in the future.
Finally, John, are there any particular websites or other sources of information that businesses should look at?
There is. I think again, another figure, 46% of people, this is from a recent survey, agree that most information about how to be secure online is confusing. I think where to find the information can be confusing because there is so much out there. There are umpteen websites. You Google cybersecurity and there are literally hundreds. It shouldn't be that confusing. Personally, the NCSC, it's the National Cyber Security Centre. It's the ncsc.gov.uk. I think it's a great site. I think it's clear. I think it's concise. It's got very easy to follow cybersecurity advice, specific guides for small and medium business. It's a very good website to follow. And of course, I will say on this webpage, part of the Chamber of Commerce, by creating this webpage together with this podcast, with the NCSC video learning package, we'll put links available to business, to individuals, of what we think, in our experience within the Cyber and Digital Crime Unit, is the best, concise and clearest advice that we can give to everybody to make themselves safe and secure online.
Okay, thanks very much, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Cumbria Chamber of Commerce podcast. You can find out more about how we're supporting Cumbrian businesses at cumbriachamber.co.uk and cumbriagrowthhub.co.uk. In the meantime, thank you very much for listening, and we'll have another episode for you next week.